Every honeybee fills with jealousy.
You gotta love this song. How Sarah Vaughan sings this just gives me goosebumps. I would love to talk about how crazy this band swings, but I'm here to talk about something else. Exactly right, the pivot. Grab the lesson manual right now, because this video is so full of exercises and licks you can take and apply directly into your playing. And when I'm looking at the material in this video, I really recommend you to slow down or pause the video and deep dive into that material, checking it out with the lesson manual right next to you, looking at the material compared to the video. And of course, in the deep dive lesson manual on Patreon, there's lots and lots more material for your practice and your playing. And with the deep dive lesson manual, I bet you learn 2 to 3 times as much from this video. Check out the deep dive lesson manual download link in the description right below. Start with the basics. This is what Barry Harris would call the pivot. Some call it the Honeysuckle Rose lick, because Fats Waller wrote this whole tune Honeysuckle Rose around just this little phrase. So in this video I want to show you how we can use this very essential bebop pivot lick. Add it into your phrases, add it into your practice, get to know it. And I also want to challenge the pivot and add some extras to it, but that comes later in the video. And then of course, take all the inspiration from the greats Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins and Michael Brecker and all the other greats that had ever been there. Let's see if we can apply this pivot lick into our playing. The pivot lick on the tune Honeysuckle Rose is on an A minor chord. So what I'm doing here is playing up the A minor chord. Now I'm taking the upper structure of the A minor, the C major, getting an A minor 9. So what I do to get the pivot is I start on the C, but I move it up top, then I play the rest of the arpeggio down. So getting a high C, E, G, B, that's the pivot. With the pivot you get this beautiful 6th jump, and that's maybe the most beautiful interval in all music. And this jazz phrase represents how we are going to use it, but there are so many other ways we can use it and so many other chords we can apply this to. I love these exercises and there's lots of them in the Patreon lesson manual. For example, play down the scale like this. Now let's take out the basic pivots and check them out, how we can add these into our licks. What I mean with basic pivots are the pivots that are actually on the chord. So on A minor it's A, on D7 it's D. In this first line we have the chord progression A minor, D7, G major, a common 2-5-1 progression. And the basic pivots, what I call them, are the pivots that belongs to these chords exactly. Let me give you an example on how we can use these. The D7 is represented in the line we just played. On the 3rd and 4th beat of the A minor chord. The A minor pivot is the first thing I play in this line. And halfway in that first bar I actually change into the G major pivot. It's a little bit hidden, but it's still there. You can move these in the rhythm and that sounds really great. So what we have with the basic pivots is this works totally great on these chords. Try it out. Play the licks in the deep dive lesson manual. There's lots of them on these basic chords, but also the upper structures. We'll get to that in a bit. And yes, exactly now when we have played the basic pivots, you know them, you know how to deal with them, get more insights in the deep dive lesson manual. But now let's move into the upper structures and see how we can play these. The upper structures, I play the A minor, then I play the C major on A minor. On the D7, I play the D7 of course, and then I play the F sharp half diminished chord. On the G major, I play the B minor to get the G major 9 chord. So I'm playing the upper structures from the 3rd of the main chord. And just like our basic idea from Honeysuckle Rose, the C major on the A minor chord, let's dig into these upper structures. What the upper structures do for us is taking us away from the little bit dull root sound of the chord. So in this first lick, I use the C major pivot on the A minor chord, getting the A minor 9. And the first thing I do in this lick on the D7, I play the F sharp half diminished chord to get the upper structure on that D7, the D9. But when you play the B minor 7 chord, the upper structure of the G major, something different happens. Because that B minor 7 chord actually reminds me so much of a D chord, a D7 chord, a D13 chord. So we're playing the dominant on that G major. That sounds a little bit funny if you really want the G major sound, the tonic sound. The D7 makes perfect sense when you're playing that 13, the B on that D major. Listen to this lick. So the 13 is a great tone on this dominant, but the B minor sound is basically the D7 sound. And now I'm talking on the pivot sound, not the general B minor chord on the G major. But if you want this pivot effect, use the E minor on G major, because then you get the G major 6. And that's a very beautiful tonic sound. And this is why we have all the chords represented except the E minor. Let's look into this. In this lick you see how the E minor works as a G major chord, the G major 6 chord. So in this lick played here, you see that I'm using the E minor on the G major chord. And I'm using exactly the same way to play the B minor 7 chord on the D7 chord to get that 13 on the D7. Now let's change up the patterns and do some extras. Always challenge these patterns. Always try to do something extra. Let's add a chromatic approach note. When you're adding these chromatic approach notes to the diatonic patterns, you always get these surprises because the chromatic approach note sounds outside. And also it forces you to change the rhythm because suddenly you got an extra note in the pattern. Here you see the C pivot and the A minor pivot. And in both of them I have added a chromatic approach note to the lowest of the tones. And I love to exercise these into the scales. So try adding the pivots with approach notes into all your scale runs. I want to show you an extra trick how you can interchange some of these chords with other scales. So getting these tritone substitutions are basically the same as just playing the major scale, but you're using at different scales, getting a completely different sound. And remember, you could also add the chromatic approach notes into the tritone substituted scale. Mix it all and get some great licks out of it. Remember that all these principles of how you can add the pivot, how you can add the chromatic notes to the pivot, how you can add the tritone substituted dominant and the chromatic notes are all in the lesson manual, the deep dive lesson manual on Patreon. Grab it and read along and play all these licks to really get into this material. I bet it'll help you so much more than just watching this video. The deep dive lesson manual download link is in the description right below. So get on board on your next bebop adventure. The one bebop rule. This is about how you can add more enclosures into your playing. Charlie Parker, Michael Brecker, Chris Potter. Play music, have fun.